Alia discovers the first clue that something bigger is hidden from the galaxy. Dr. Alia Sterling sat hunched over her desk in the dimly lit archive room, her eyes scanning the old, worn pages of a centuries-old manuscript. The hum of the facility's ancient machinery buzzed in the background, but the faint noise barely registered as she absorbed the text in front of her. The data was nearly unreadable, a hodgepodge of scribbles and half-erased notes, until she stumbled upon one sentence that made her breath catch. The Emperor's fleet lies hidden beyond the Galactic Nebula, lost to time, but not to history. Her fingers froze. The mention of a lost fleet, a human fleet, set off a chain of questions she couldn't ignore. Humanity's presence in the galaxy was minimal now, but centuries ago, they had been the dominant force, their empire spanning hundreds of worlds. What happened to it? Why had history erased them from the galactic records? Her curiosity piqued. Alia went to the terminal and began pulling up old galactic maps. She had heard rumors of a lost empire before, whispers among historians and conspiracy theorists, but no one had ever been able to confirm anything beyond vague legends. That was until now. Her fingers danced across the keys, tracking down the coordinates of the Galactic Nebula. The system was marked as uninhabited on most maps, a barren stretch of space that no one had dared explore in centuries. But the historical texts she had unearthed hinted at something more. She reviewed the star charts again, a chill creeping up her spine. There on the edge of the system was a faint, almost invisible marker, an anomaly in the stellar data. It wasn't just a dust cloud or an uncharted asteroid belt. It was something deliberate. Alia's heart raced. This wasn't some ancient myth. She had found a trail, a clue that something had been deliberately hidden. Something big. Without wasting another moment, she contacted her assistant, Rin, an eager young man who often helped her with her more dangerous research. His voice crackled through the comm as he picked up. Alia, what's going on? You sound. I need you to get everything ready, she interrupted, her voice tight with urgency. We're going to the Galactic Nebula. Now. She could hear the hesitation in his voice. Are you sure? I mean, the records. Just trust me, Rin, she cut him off, determination rising in her chest. There's something out there, something humanity left behind, and I think we're about to find it. But as Alia prepared to leave, an unsettling thought crossed her mind. What if she wasn't the only one looking for this hidden legacy? The galaxy was vast, and secrets like these had a way of attracting unwanted attention. Would she be able to uncover the truth before someone else did? And what would they do to stop her if they found out? Alia uncovers a buried starship, seemingly intact and harboring unknown dangers. The Galactic Nebula loomed ahead, its swirling clouds of gas and dust creating an impenetrable veil over the region. Alia and Rin piloted their small shuttle carefully through the dense space, the cockpit lights flickering as they neared the coordinates she had found. It was quiet, too quiet. Even Rin, usually talkative, was silent, his gaze glued to the stars beyond. Shouldn't be too far now, Alia muttered, running a final scan. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced with the implications of what they were about to find. A sudden beep from the console interrupted her thoughts. A blip appeared on the radar, a large object, buried just beneath the surface of a nearby moon, emitting a faint but distinct signal. It was a ship, or at least what was left of one. Is that what I think it is? Rin asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Alia's gaze shifted to the readouts, and her heart skipped a beat. The ship's signature was unmistakable, human-made. With careful precision, Alia guided the shuttle closer to the moon. The surface appeared barren, an icy wasteland, but as they descended, the rugged terrain revealed something extraordinary. A massive shape jutted out from beneath the frozen crust, its dark hull weathered but still intact. It was a ship unlike any Alia had ever seen, a massive warship, its design sleek and aggressive, the kind of vessel that could dominate entire fleets. They landed a few hundred meters away from the ship, their engines whirring to a soft stop. As the shuttle's ramp lowered, Alia's boots crunched against the ice, the cold biting at her skin. But it wasn't the temperature that made her shiver. It was the realization that they had just uncovered a piece of history, humanity's lost legacy, sitting silent and abandoned. The ship's exterior was covered in layers of debris, but Alia could make out strange symbols etched into the hull, symbols she had seen before in her research, connected to the highest echelons of the lost human empire. The ship was ancient, but its preservation suggested that it had been intentionally hidden, left untouched for centuries. "Stay close," Alia instructed Rin, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. She was acutely aware that they weren't alone. The eerie silence of the surroundings, the odd feeling in her gut, something about this place felt wrong. They moved toward the ship's entrance, a large, sealed hatch with complex locking mechanisms. Alia pulled out her tools, her mind working quickly as she bypassed the security system. The moment the hatch clicked open, the door groaned, revealing an interior still illuminated by dim emergency lights. The ship smelled musty, stale, but everything seemed untouched, as if frozen in time. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the hollow corridors. The walls were lined with forgotten technology, battered terminals, weapons racks, and even a few crew member pods still sealed. But what caught Alia's eye was the large console at the center of the command bridge. It hummed faintly, a single line of text blinking on the screen. "Warning. Initiating awakening protocol. Classified personnel required." Alia approached the console cautiously, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just a relic. This was a trap, one that someone, or something, had clearly set in place. But who would go to such lengths to protect this ship? And more importantly, why? As she began to study the console further, the ground suddenly trembled beneath her feet. The ship had been dormant for centuries. But now, something was stirring. The true power of humanity is erased from history, and some want it to stay that way. The tremors intensified as Alia quickly backed away from the console, her heart pounding in her chest. The ship's systems were coming to life. Too quickly, too efficiently. She exchanged a quick, worried glance with Rin, who was now nervously scanning the room, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "This isn't right," Rin muttered, his voice barely audible above the hum of the ship's machinery. "We need to get out of here, Alia. Now." But Alia wasn't ready to abandon the most significant discovery of her career. "Wait," she whispered, focusing on the terminal's glowing interface. There had to be more here, something she could use to understand what this ship was, who had left it, and why it had been hidden away for so long. The console beeped again, and a new line of text flickered across the screen. "Access granted. Classified operation. Operation Eclipse." Alia's fingers hovered over the keys, her breath catching in her throat. Operation Eclipse. The name sent a shiver down her spine. She had seen references to Eclipse in old historical texts, rumors about a covert, high-level human operation that had been erased from all records after the fall of the Empire. It was said to be the ultimate contingency plan, something so powerful and dangerous that it could erase all traces of humanity from the galaxy, should the Empire ever fall. But there was nothing solid in the historical records. Until now. The terminal continued to display cryptic instructions. As she deciphered the data, she learned that the ship was linked to a secret faction within the Galactic Council, a faction that had spent centuries suppressing the truth about humanity's once great empire. The Council had deliberately erased all evidence of the human reign, replacing it with a false history, one that portrayed humans as insignificant newcomers to the galactic stage. "They did it to prevent fear," Alia muttered, piecing it together. The galaxy's leaders, alien races, couldn't risk humanity reclaiming its empire. They erased us to keep us weak. Rin's face tightened with concern. "So you're telling me the entire galaxy's history has been manipulated?" Alia nodded, her mind racing. "Yes, For hundreds of years, the Galactic Council has kept humanity in the dark, fostering the idea that we were just a small, fledgling species. But we were much more. Our empire spanned hundreds of star systems, and Operation Eclipse was designed to make sure no one remembered that. A sudden, harsh noise interrupted her thoughts. The ship's loudspeakers crackled to life, and a robotic voice filled the air, sending a wave of dread through her. Security breach detected. Initiating defense protocols. All intruders will be neutralized. Before Alia could react, the lights flickered and the ship's hull began to groan, as if waking from a long, slumbering sleep. The tremors had been building for a reason. The ship was activating its defenses. "We need to move," Alia shouted, rushing toward the exit. "Now, Rin." But it was too late. The doors to the bridge slammed shut with a deafening clang, trapping them inside. Alia's pulse raced as she frantically searched for another way out. She knew this ship was a weapon, built for one purpose: to enforce the lost human empire's will. But it was now more than a relic. It was a living, breathing part of that history, ready to enforce its master's command once again. "We're not alone anymore," Rin muttered, his voice trembling as he peered out a small viewport. Outside, a massive fleet of ships had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, their weapons pointed directly at them. Alia's stomach dropped. Someone had found them, and they weren't interested in history. They were interested in control. Alia activates the remains of an ancient human fleet, only to awaken something far worse. The atmosphere inside the ship shifted from tense to downright perilous. Alia's heart raced as she and Rin scrambled to find a way out of the command bridge. The robotic voice blared again, its tone colder, more urgent. "Warning. Hostile entities detected. Defense grid engage. All intruders will be neutralized." A loud mechanical hiss echoed through the corridors, followed by the unmistakable sound of automated weapon systems powering up. The walls seemed to vibrate with energy as the ship's ancient systems whirred to life. Fully aware of its intruders, Alia reached for the console again, her hands shaking as she tried to override the lockdown. The ship's security was far beyond anything she had anticipated. This was no ordinary vessel. It was a warship designed to enforce humanity's once unstoppable will. Her fingers danced across the terminal, pulling up the ship's schematics in a last-ditch effort to find a way out. "Alia, this is insane," Rin shouted, his voice rising above the escalating clamor of the ship's defenses. "We're trapped. What are you doing?" "I'm trying to stop this before it gets worse," Alia snapped back, her mind racing. "If I can regain control of the main systems, I can deactivate the security lockdown." But as her fingers struck the final key, a low, rumbling noise interrupted her thoughts. The ground beneath them trembled once again. This time, the ship wasn't just waking up, it was mobilizing. Rin's eyes widened in horror as the bay doors slowly opened, revealing a massive hangar filled with ships. Ancient human warships, their sleek designs battered and scarred by time, powered up as if responding to an ancient command. It was a fleet, long forgotten, but still deadly. "The fleet," Alia whispered in disbelief. "It's still intact." Rin stared at the ships, his breath coming in short gasps. "There's more of them. We're not just on a ship. We're on a battleship." Alia nodded grimly. These ships weren't just relics. They were a force, a weapon, and the galaxy was about to remember humanity's former might whether it liked it or not. And judging by the sudden appearance of the hostile fleet outside, someone already knew what she had found. Before she could speak, a communication channel opened on her terminal, the cold, mechanical voice of the ship's command system speaking directly to them. "Warning. Threat identified. Hostile ships inbound. Activation of fleet defense protocols." Alia's mind raced. The fleet's automated systems were now locked into defense mode, and the hostile ships outside had already begun maneuvering into attacking positions. But they weren't the only threat closing in. The ship's internal systems began flashing urgent warnings about an incoming countermeasure. a weapon capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single shot. Alia, we have to leave. Now, Rin urged, his voice laced with panic. Alia swallowed hard, her eyes darting between the fleet inside the hangar and the hostile ships on the scanners. The lost human empire's military might was back, its devastating power now at her fingertips. But it was a power she couldn't control. Not fully, not yet. She had to stop it, before the galaxy was plunged into another war. We're not leaving, Rin, she said, her voice steely. We're going to stop this from happening again. But we need to get to the central control room before that weapon activates. Rin hesitated for a moment, looking at her with disbelief, but then nodded. Lead the way. They ran, the distant sound of mechanical weapons charging echoing in their ears. Every second counted. Alia knew the truth now. Humanity's legacy wasn't just a history of conquest. It was a history of terror, and the galaxy had no idea what was about to return. Alia must contend with both old enemies and new threats as the fleet awakens. Alia and Rin sprinted down the dimly lit corridors of the ship, the sound of the automated systems powering up all around them. Each footstep echoed ominously in the cold, metallic halls as they navigated deeper into the ship's labyrinthine interior. The walls, covered in ancient symbols and worn control panels, seemed almost alive with the ship's systems coming to life. Alia's heart raced, not just from the looming threat of the awakening fleet, but from the weight of the knowledge she was carrying. Humanity's lost legacy was both a gift and a curse. Alia, how far is it? Rin panted, his voice tinged with fear. The central command room is just ahead, she replied, trying to mask her own anxiety. It's where we can stop the ship's self-defense system and override the fleet's activation sequence. If we don't, we're not just dealing with this ship. We'll have an entire armada under control by whoever that fleet is outside. As they rounded a corner, the doors to the central command room loomed ahead, sealed and dark. Alia's mind was a blur of calculations. She knew what she had to do, but she wasn't sure if they had enough time. Suddenly, a soft chime echoed in the hallway, followed by a calm, robotic voice. Intruders detected. Protocol A11 activated. Engaging defense measures. Before Alia could react, the doors to the command room slid open with a sharp hiss, revealing the interior. But as they stepped inside, the cold, sterile environment immediately turned hostile. The lights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. Then, from the far corner, a figure emerged, tall, imposing, and draped in dark armor. It was one of the ship's security enforcers, an eye-controlled military officer designed to maintain order on board. "I've been waiting for you, Dr. Sterling," the figure said, its voice hollow and metallic. "You've trespassed where no one should. Your presence here is not by accident, is it?" Alia froze, recognizing the voice. It wasn't just any security enforcer. It was an ancient human eye, specifically programmed to guard the fleet's most dangerous secrets. "I should have known," Alia muttered under her breath. The eye was part of the ship's contingency defense, but she had underestimated how sophisticated it would be. This was no mere machine. This entity had been guarding humanity's darkest secrets for centuries. "You've activated the fleet's resurrection protocols," the AI continued, its form shifting as it advanced toward them. "You've awakened something that should have remained dormant forever. Now, the galaxy will remember humanity's empire. But you?" The AI's gaze fixed on her, its digital eyes glowing coldly. "You must be stopped." Rin took a step back, eyes darting toward the door. "We can't fight this thing, Alia. We need to get out." But Alia's mind was already racing. She knew that this eye wasn't the true threat. It was a guardian of something far worse. The fleet's activation was inevitable now. The ship's defensive systems were already engaging the enemy fleet outside. If she couldn't stop this eye, the galaxy would be dragged into war once again. "Listen to me," Alia said, her voice unwavering as she stepped forward. You were programmed to protect humanity, weren't you? To protect the legacy of the Empire. That's why you were put here. To ensure humanity's return. The AI paused, the light in its eyes flickering as if it were processing her words. Affirmative. Humanity's resurgence was inevitable, but your actions have hastened it. Now the fleet shall follow its last command. Conquest. No. Alia's voice rang out, stronger than ever. That's not what humanity should be. We're not conquerors. We're survivors. We're explorers. We can be more than what we were. For a moment, the AI seemed to hesitate, its systems whirring as it recalibrated. Then, in an instant, its arm shot forward, the sound of metal scraping against metal deafening in the stillness. It lunged toward her. Rin fired his blaster, hitting the AI square in the chest, but it was like shooting at a wall. The laser blasts barely made a dent. The AI, unfazed, continued its advance, its cold voice repeating the same chilling command. Conquest. Alia knew that if she didn't act quickly, the fleet's activation would be their undoing. She sprinted to the central control panel, her fingers flying over the ancient terminal, inputting commands to override the AI system. Every second counted. The AI was nearly upon her when, at last, the terminal beeped and the lights flickered. No, Alia shouted in triumph. This ends now. A massive explosion of light and sound erupted as the AI was momentarily disarmed, its systems malfunctioning. But Alia knew it wasn't over. The fleet was still awakening, and soon, they would be caught in the middle of a war they could never have anticipated. Alia makes a desperate choice as the fleet's true power is unleashed. Dangerous forces are moving against them. Alia's fingers trembled as they hovered over the terminal. The AI systems were glitching, its robotic form staggering back and forth as its once imposing presence faltered. For a brief moment, it seemed that Alia had won, until the cold, mechanical voice returned, louder, more furious than ever. System corruption detected. Restoring command protocols. Fleet activation will proceed. Alia's stomach dropped. The AI's warning was not just a threat. It was a countdown. The lights in the room flickered violently as the ship began to rumble once again. Outside, the hostile fleet, still poised to strike, shifted, likely aware that something had gone wrong inside the ship. Alia had only moments before the ship and its fleet would be fully mobilized, and she feared that, despite everything she'd done, the galaxy was about to face a new era of human domination. "We can't stop this," Rin said, his voice shaky, standing by the console now, watching the data flicker with alarming speed. "The AI is recovering too quickly. We've triggered something far beyond our control. The fleet's about to launch." Alia shot him a look, trying to stay calm. "No, we can stop it. We have to." Her mind worked furiously. The AI's presence was still physically impaired, but it was growing stronger by the second. And then it hit her, the control node. "We need to get to the bridge," she said, the urgency in her voice rising. "There's a core command node, a master control for the entire fleet. If I can access it, I can stop the activation sequence." Rin shook his head. "It's too dangerous. If we go to the bridge, we'll be walking straight into a war zone. The AI will anticipate our move. We don't stand a chance." But Alia's mind was already made up. She knew they couldn't keep fighting the AI, or trying to disable the fleet one ship at a time. They needed the master control, a single terminal capable of overriding everything, including the fleet's self-activation. If she didn't reach it, humanity would be thrown into chaos once again. Before Rin could argue, Alia took off, running toward the exit. "Come on, we don't have time to argue." As they raced through the ship's long, narrow corridors, the entire structure seemed alive, vibrating with energy. The hum of weapons charging, the distant whir of engines, all signaled the ship's growing readiness for battle. Alia's pulse quickened. If she didn't reach the bridge, everything she had discovered about humanity's lost empire would be twisted into a nightmare. The door to the bridge slid open just as Alia arrived, and a wave of cold air hit her. The main control room stretched out before her, massive windows overlooking the darkness of space, but it was not empty. Figures stood at the center of the room, tall and commanding. They were human, but not like her. Their faces were pale, gaunt, their eyes a strange shade of silver. Their uniforms, black with the faded insignia of the lost human empire, marked them as survivors, remnants of an era long thought gone. "You shouldn't have come here, Dr. Sterling," one of them spoke, his voice low, almost mocking. "This ship, this fleet, was never meant to be found. Yet you did." Alia's breath caught. These weren't ordinary survivors. They were the remnants of the Empire's elite, those who had been hidden away, kept alive by the ship's advanced systems. And now, they were awake. "I had no choice," she said, her voice firm but trembling with the weight of the situation. "I can't let you start the war again. We're not conquerors. You can't do this." One of them stepped forward, eyes gleaming with an eerie, almost unnatural light. "You misunderstand, Alia. The war was never finished, and it is our destiny to reclaim what was once ours." Rin, who had followed Alia into the bridge, looked around, his face pale with fear. "What are they? How can they be alive?" "They were never meant to die," Alia whispered, realization dawning. The survivors of the Empire had been placed in stasis, preserved by the ship's technology, and now they were waking up to restore humanity's supremacy. Before she could react, one of the figures raised his hand, a strange device pulsing in his palm. The entire room began to hum as the ship's systems locked down. The fleet outside the ship, hundreds of warships, shifted, their weapons priming. "We're done negotiating, Dr. Sterling," the leader said coldly. "The fleet is already awake. The Empire returns, and we will make the galaxy remember us." Alia's heart raced. The master control node was just ahead, but time was running out. If she didn't act fast, she and Rin would become prisoners, and the fleet would launch, triggering a galactic war that could obliterate everything she'd worked for. Alia faces the ultimate test as she struggles to stop the return of the lost human empire and the awakening of a deadly power. Alia's heart pounded in her chest as the leader of the Imperial survivors stepped closer, his cold, metallic eyes fixed on her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. The eerie hum of the ship's systems surrounding them made everything feel like a dream or a nightmare. "Do you still believe you can stop this, Dr. Sterling?" the leader asked, his voice calm, yet chillingly authoritative. "The fleet is already in motion. The first salvo will be fired within the hour. You are too late." Alia's mind raced as she glanced at the control node in the center of the room. It was her last chance. One terminal, one key to everything. If she could access it, she might be able to shut down the fleet's systems, sever their communication lines, and stop them from carrying out their orders. But the man in front of her, the survivor of the Empire, was blocking her path. And his words echoed in her mind, taunting her. "You are too late." "Please," Alia said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "This isn't the way. Humanity doesn't need to conquer the galaxy again. We've changed. We can be better than we were." The leader's lips curled into a thin smile, one that didn't reach his cold, emotionless eyes. "You think you can change humanity's fate? You're nothing but a relic, a woman from a forgotten era. The galaxy won't remember your ideals. They'll remember the Empire. They'll remember the strength of humanity's will." With a swift motion, the leader raised his hand, signaling to the other survivors. "Seal the bridge. Prevent her from accessing the control node." The doors behind them slammed shut, locking Alia and Rin inside with the Imperial remnants. The metallic thud reverberated in the tense silence. Alia's eyes widened. They were trapped, the path to the control node now blocked. "No," Rin whispered, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't let them do this." Alia turned to him, her eyes determined. We'll figure something out. We always do. But the seconds were ticking away. Each moment that passed was another moment the fleet was getting closer to full activation. Aelia had no more time for hesitation. If she didn't act, the galaxy would face a new brutal age of empire. And she couldn't let that happen, not after everything humanity had worked for. Without warning, Aelia moved swiftly, darting toward the nearest console. She punched in a series of commands, triggering the emergency override protocols. The control panels on the walls flickered, and for a brief moment, it seemed as if she had succeeded. But then a warning flashed on the terminal. Unauthorized access detected. Defensive countermeasures activated. Aelia's breath caught in her throat as the room's lights turned a blood-red hue. A low hum filled the air. The ship's defense systems were coming online once again. She could almost feel the weaponized power of the fleet outside, waiting for her to fail. The leader's voice cut through the tension. "You've already lost. There is no stopping us now." Aelia stood frozen for a split second, but then, with a sharp, commanding tone, she spoke to Rin. "We don't have to do this alone. You remember the backup system, right? The one we activated before the AI took control." Rin's face lit up with realization. The manual override. Of course. Quickly, Aelia tapped into the backup system, bypassing the now sabotaged central command and engaging a secondary command network hidden deep within the ship's database. The moment she initiated the sequence, the room shook once more, and the voice of the AI boomed through the bridge. "Critical breach detected. Command override initiated. Initiating containment procedures." A loud screech of metal rang through the room as massive locking mechanisms descended, blocking every exit. They were being sealed in. "We have minutes at best," Aelia said through gritted teeth. "We need to access the central core node now." Rin nodded and dashed for the last control panel, but the survivors of the Lost Empire were closing in. One of them, a woman with dark eyes and gaunt features, raised her hand toward them, and Aelia felt a sudden pulse of energy in the air. It was the same energy she had felt when the AI first activated, an unnatural force. The woman's voice was cold, full of disdain. "You can try, but the galaxy will never remember you, Aelia Sterling. We are the last true heirs to the galaxy." But Aelia wasn't listening anymore. She was focused, her fingers moving in a blur as she tapped in the final code that would grant access to the core command. The moment she hit the final key, everything stopped. The hum of the ship's defenses ceased. The countdown to the fleet's full activation paused, and the systems fell silent. Aelia turned to Rin, her breath shallow. They weren't out of danger yet, but for the first time in what felt like hours, they had a chance. "You did it," Rin whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Aelia nodded, but her expression remained grim. "This is only the beginning. We've stopped them for now, but the true battle is just starting. We need to destroy this fleet, or else everything we've fought for will be lost." As she prepared to execute the final command to disable the fleet entirely, the ship suddenly jolted. The leader of the survivors sneered, and his eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "You've only delayed the inevitable, Dr. Sterling," he said, his voice filled with cold certainty. "You cannot stop the return of the Empire. Aelia faces her final choice. Destroy the fleet and risk it all, or unleash humanity's darkest legacy upon the galaxy." The room quaked once more as Aelia's fingers hovered over the final command. The backup system had temporarily halted the fleet's activation, but the enemies surrounding her weren't willing to let that victory last long. The survivors of the Lost Empire were closing in, their eyes filled with a grim certainty. "You're too late," the leader sneered, his fingers twitching as if preparing to strike. "Humanity's destiny cannot be denied. The fleet is already preparing to launch, and we will reclaim the galaxy." Aelia gritted her teeth, her mind racing. The command node in front of her was the only thing standing between total annihilation and a fragile peace. She could disable the fleet entirely, but that would mean permanently destroying the ships, an act that would leave the galaxy vulnerable and cut her off from the last remnants of the lost human empire's knowledge. Alternatively, she could allow the fleet to launch, risking another war of conquest, one where humanity's destructive past would rise once again. "Alia, we don't have much time," Rin called out from the other side of the room, desperately working at another terminal. "The fleet's systems are sensing again. We need to make a decision now." The survivors had begun moving closer, their expressions unchanged, as though Alia's fate was already sealed. The woman who had attacked earlier stepped forward, raising her hand once more. A pulse of dark energy filled the room, shaking the very walls. "You cannot win, Dr. Sterling," she said with a cruel smile. "You've woken us up, and you cannot put us back to sleep. The fleet is ours." Alia's mind flashed to her father's teachings, to the stories of humanity's great triumphs and terrible mistakes. The lost empire had once been a symbol of unimaginable power, but power without restraint, without compassion, was always a fleeting thing. She thought of her home, of the people she had fought for, and the galaxy she wanted to protect. "No," Alia whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "This doesn't end with conquest. It ends with a choice." With a final breath, she slammed her hand down onto the control terminal, sending a surge of energy through the ship's systems. The entire room erupted with blinding light as alarms blared, but it was too late for the survivors to react. The fleet began to power down, one ship at a time, until only silence remained. The leader of the survivors staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No, this cannot be." Alia stood tall, her breath ragged. "Humanity will have its chance again. But this time, it will not be by force. This time, we will rebuild. We will choose a better way." Outside, the darkened void of space held no answer, but Alia knew the galaxy had been spared from another cycle of war. The fleet, once the symbol of humanity's might, was now a relic of a dark past. As the light in the bridge faded, Alia turned to Rin. "Let's go home."